Good evening. Welcome back to Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a wholly owned subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Educate, enlighten, entertain. And on our second episode of the State of Current Affairs with your hosts Lillian Cauldwell and Viki Esther Chang, we are going to talk about a plethora of subjects which we started speaking about on the first program of this podcast. So, what are some of the major points? And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to give you ways to solve some of these problems. So unlike that package one collects on a Christmas story and finally change you into one spectral form, we're going to show you how to cut the baggage and unfortunately fall into the spiritual sea. But we'll talk about that next time. So, without further ado, we will continue about the pollutions of the ocean and also the pollution orbiting planet Earth and our second moon that's going to appear for 9 days and then disappear in a blaze of glory. We are going to be talking about what is man's, that includes women as well, and older teens for that matter, responsibility and accountability to their planet. So I'm going to let Viki start off where she left off yesterday. Good evening, Viki. How are you doing?
Hello, everyone. I'm right here in Singapore. It is 9:42 p.m. on a Thursday evening. It is the 26th September, a beautiful evening. I'm having a authentic background, a little bit of light from the street in my house. Singapore, ladies and gentlemen, it is a tropical island off the equator, and we have our latest census, population census that has just been released by the state media, is 6.04 million of residents of I should say Singaporeans, born Singaporeans and naturalized citizens, whom we call residents here, and that does not include non-residents. Non-residents meaning they are foreigners working here, probably about 1 million or two. That makes a lot of people on a very small island. So, ladies and gentlemen, you are really fortunate, and I'm humbled to be here, to be sharing the stage with Lillian Cauldwell, my dear collaborator since the pandemic times 2020. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about our planet because it's such a huge topic Lillian has just talked about. And we will be talking about the different aspects that we are as human polluting the world. But why is pollution a big topic, even though we don't see them if we throw them into the bin? Really because they're unseen. So we don't talk about it. So that's why podcasts or radio like us, we have a responsibility to bring this up for everyone to remember the sense of responsibility to our planet Earth and to the community. I would like to talk about pollution, plastics. I'll give you run down a couple of data. But I would like to start off also about a person, a news article that I just read in the news. Lillian, should I just start off with that article?
Why don't you start off with the article, and then if you have some opinions, interject them along the way, because the audience appreciates the facts and the figures, but they love to hear what you have to say and think about, because everybody has the facts and figures, but not everybody has the wherewithal to really say it like it really should be said.
Yes, and I do want to say that. Firstly, here a really quick summary run through about plastics. Ocean pollution is a major global environmental issue from Google, affecting marine ecosystems, wildlife, human life. And here are some three statistics that I'm able to bring up so that we can take away remembering just three things. Number one, plastic waste. 11 million metric tons of plastic enter the ocean each year. 11 million metric tons. In 2 years, you multiply that by two, right? 3 years, you multiply that by three. And can you get rid of it? No. There's only input but no output, right? Next, it is estimated that this could triple by 2040. That means the amount that we put into the ocean, that we dump into the ocean, could triple by 2040 if no actions are taken, and no meaningful actions are taken right now. It is estimated that by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean by weight than all the fish in the ocean. That means you're going to see the ocean below. If you wear your goggles when you go and swim, you will see the ocean with the trash stacked up and probably a couple of fish kind of like swimming, all right, by 2050. That's the first stat, first data. Number two, plastic decomposition. Now, plastic takes 500 to 1,000 years to degrade in the ocean. And much of it breaks down into microplastics. And you know what microplastics they are? They are because they are of molecular size. Number three, what are microplastics? About 14 million metric tons, 14 million metric tons of microplastics are currently on the sea floor. We're not talking about those that is being dumped. We're talking about those that is already being accumulated on the sea floor already. So that is 14 million metric tons of microplastics currently on the seafloor already. And microplastics are found in sea turtles, 100% of sea turtles, 59% of whales, and 36 of seals studied. So, I mean, it goes on. It just goes on. So I can't even start to even talk about how sad, how desperate the situation is, Lillian. And we cannot imagine about plastics like we can't imagine greenhouse gases and pollutants being spewed out into the air. So that we'll leave climate change on another day. But let's talk about plastics, because during pandemic times, when the whole world was locked down in 2020, you realize that because there wasn't a lot of activity on ocean, all the plastics were swept up onto the sea. So I think during those times, people were alert because everyone was actually shut out from your neighbors, from all the distractions. We're all in our homes. We start to look at the news and some of the news that comes out. And at those times in 2020, if you remember, Lillian, when we did Unsung Heroes with Dr. Moby, those times, there are a lot of news about the environment, and people were concerned about the environment because we realized that humans have actually started a habitation in natural environment and taking over the nature. And during those times of shutdown, if you remember, animals started to come out into the streets. So even in Singapore, you've got the turtles, you've got the horses, you've got the deer coming on the streets because everyone was on lockdown. But it was only during those times that we were so quiet. When our senses start to quieten down, we start to become sensitive with our souls about the environment. And right now, post-pandemic times, activity goes up again. We are faced with everyday grind. We forgot about the world out there that actually we have disturbed so much that have caused things like the pandemics. So Lillian, again, just a flashback, just a throwback, if you kind of juxtapose during 2020, when we all were locked down, you were locked down, I was locked down, Everyone was locked down in the whole world. In the whole history of human nature, the animals came out. And when the animals came out, we started to realize, hey, we were treading on their land. And then the plastics start kind of floating out. And because no one was actually collecting the rubbish outside of our house, right? In the streets, they got piled up because it was the pandemic. So then people start to think about, yes, we have to take care of the environment. If the next huge pandemic may just hit us, but look at what's happening right now. We've forgotten about the plastics. We've forgotten about trash. We've forgotten about animals. We've forgotten about pandemics. And pandemic is actually just a symptom of how we have actually disturbed environment. I mean, let alone how it's done in the labs. I mean, I'm talking about natural occurring uh, bacteria, natural occurring organisms that we have disturbed that is coming to attack us. So I think, Lillian, this is a huge issue. Uh, I really want to talk about the huge issue because you've looked at one stat, the data, that plastics, non-biodegradable plastics, right, takes about 500 years or 1,000 years to degrade,
I
to
I would
break
like to
down.
interject one thing.
Yes,
Ladies and
please do.
gentlemen, I'm going to give you a homework assignment in relation to plastic. Now, you're going to get a small aquarium or find one. They've been discarded all over the place. You could probably find them in the junkyard, or just get a big plastic bowl, or excuse me, glass bowl. And if you live in an apartment, go find yourself a container that you can fill it with dirt. And you're looking at me going, gosh, she's off her rocker. This ought to be interesting. All right. For the big glass bowl, fill it with water. Go out and collect pebbles. They're all over the place. You cannot miss them. There are extra pebbles strewing the streets, the sidewalk, lawns. Put those on the bottom. Those pebbles represent the bottom of the ocean, right? And then get some goldfish. Just don't feed them, otherwise they'll occupy the whole tank. And put them in there. Now, find some plastic, bottles, containers, I don't care what it is, those little things that tie around bottles, and start throwing it into the tank as garbage, as waste, or maybe some chemicals, or maybe some food coloring, or
Food
maybe some of those
coloring,
that stuff we
additives,
put in to make things taste better. You know what it is.
additives.
Additives. Just thrown in. And after a week, take a good look.
At the
That's
goldfish.
representative of your ocean. And you're going to do the same thing with that container of dirt. And in addition to plastic, you're going to put in, I don't know, Pampers, or maybe a tampon or two, or some garbage. And if you're living in an apartment or a condo, you're not recycling, so you can throw in some fruit or vegetable scraps. And by the end of the week, take a good look. And it'll probably smell like hell. And then look at that and start
Goldfish.
computing what it's going to look like and does look like in that Pacific, Indian, Atlantic. I mean, in the Dead Sea, it's dead, so everything floats on the top. Nothing sinks because of the salt content. It wasn't like that originally, folks. Man had to go out of their way to come up with a sea where you float, which is good because then you can't take your own life, right? Well, if you get too much saline into your system, it can kill you that way. I got to tell you, on God's earth, if you try hard enough, you can do away with yourself and the population for that matter. And the
Yeah.
reason why I'm having you do this, we are having you do this, is that if you cannot picture the destruction, we don't have to wait to God to, with all the different plagues he sent to Egypt. We're the plague. We're the
We're the
locusts.
plague.
We're the ones eating everything down and destroying its roots so it doesn't regrow. And those two examples, tell you what, you put one together, send us a picture, and the best picture will be shown on our program. It can be a K through 12 school project, a 4-year project for those who are in college or university and taking environmental science or some of the other sciences that are now developing to deal with the pollution. Or it can be a political science part of a project where you're trying to get a point across and no one is listening. And this is a good way to protest. I mean, the garbage is all around you, so it's not like you have to make any. But the fact of the matter is that you need to see what you are being held accountable for and responsible for.
Yeah,
So, like I said,
totally. Totally.
take the picture and send it in to PWR Network LLC at gmail.com, or put it in and text it to me at the phone number below, 484-364-1032. Because I'm telling you right now, it's not going to go away. It's going to get worse. I wouldn't worry about the atomic bomb because our own pollution and neglect of this planet is going to kill us faster, or at least be an even pace with the atomic bomb. And a side note, for all those people who have bought bunkers down in New Zealand with the type of bombs that are now being created, there is no way you'll be able to leave that bunker for about 2 or 3,000 years. So unless you can store food and water, because you have to have water, don't even think it. Although I was advised once when I was on a hike that if you put a pebble in your mouth, that will help lubricate it. Or hope someone designs a suit the way they created one for Dune. Because the gentleman who wrote those books was also a scientist. And in space, they drink the urine. Now back to Viki.
Lillian, such a good experiment that every student should be made to do it. That's like a realization in their eyes and not just reading a textbook in terms of just black and white words. And I totally echo that. Think about we are the goldfish swimming in there. Think about our world likened to the goldfish that we are. We are the goldfish. Um, we are bombarded. Lillian, we were just talking about plastics in the ocean, but let's open up the concept a little bit, like what you say, the goldfish in the little aquarium, right? I really love that because we can all visualize that and we can't visualize data, right? Data is good for education, but we really want to visualize it so that it kind of like pains us when we look at it and we really, really get struck between the eyes. Think about us living in this house, living in your apartment. The paint that we paint on the wall, plastics with formaldehyde, with volatile compound, the VOCs. I'm not sure if Americans are concerned about the VOCs and the formaldehyde and the chemicals that emit and gas out of furniture, and that causes a lot of diseases, and it causes a lot of modern diseases every day. They discover diseases, but actually diseases are created. You're talking about fabric, the paint and the plastics that go into the color. You're talking about paint in the wood that we actually treat the wood. But I think a lot of us have the power as consumers if we understand these are the things that we are emitting out, and when we demand manufacturers, right, with the power of a purchasing power, that they become more responsible when they are manufacturing these things, like the curtain, the paint, the the I mean all the other things that we have in the kitchen, right? If
Right.
we demand things from the consumer point, and then it kind of like a domino effect backwards, because consumer demand is huge demand.
Mhm.
Because when we as consumers are educated and aware about the dollar, that we can come together to make changes. And that's how shareholders are, right? Shareholders are stakeholders in a company. They want certain things to be done. They use that vote in the company, and we vote with our dollar. If consumers like ourselves, through the podcast, through education, through awareness, they understand these are pollutants, and we demand manufacturers to be more responsible when you manufacture stuff, something like this. They will not be throwing off their pollution into the oceans, the rivers, and also into the underground well, or the underground water. So we're talking about two things here. They all work hand in hand, Lillian, from institutional level to private corporational level and to individual level. And I call it the public, private, and personal responsibility, the three P's. And these three P's have to work in symphony. And I think it's really hard for corporations, because they're driven by profit, to really go for the lowest cost. Because if you choose things that of the highest quality, they cost more. But if you choose things that are organic, that they are sourced responsibly, they are more expensive. So corporations really are, we don't know how they work, because it's opaque to us as consumers, the method of manufacturing and the choices of supply from the supply chain. But as consumers, if we are collectively educated, we can demand through our dollar for things, to purchase things from responsibly sourced manufacturers, or manufacturers who source their supply responsibly and with sustainability, through sustainable practices. I think a lot of it has to come from us as individual consumers. So it starts from education and awareness. We push it. And it has to be another whole level of generation, right? You, your grandchildren, your children, your neighbors. We have to come collectively together, from USA to Singapore to Japan to South Korea, to many parts of the world where consumers are aware, and exert that kind of understanding to the manufacturers, to the private sector, to tell them that, hey, we want you to be more responsible in terms of manufacturing, and to be more sustainable in their practices, and to source for goods and resources that's sustainable, and responsible for that. And then on the other hand, as an individual, we can choose responsible practices within our households. So we choose responsible within our households, like myself. I know things are more expensive, and you got to pay for the premium C when you search for companies that are responsible. You have the CSR companies, right? Corporate social responsibility practices through companies. So if we make a conscious effort to put our dollar in companies that are responsible and are using sustainable practices, these companies will in turn grow vis-a-vis those companies that are irresponsible and also polluting the world. I mean, there are a lot of companies, and I don't even want to start saying and listing them out. I think that's the job of the NGOs. But I think the consumer can start. It's not powerless. We can do it in our household, and I'm doing that because I don't mind paying a little bit, right, to a company who's responsible, number one. I don't mind walking another mile, maybe throwing the things, wrapping them up and putting the things in a particular place. And instead of burning them in the open space, you cannot burn things in the open space because there are dioxins. People get dioxins, Lillian. People get cancer if you burn plastics in the open.
Yes,
So
well,
we have to be responsible,
you have
and
to be responsible.
consumers like us, we have to be responsible for our actions. We cannot be burning things in the open. The third thing I like to talk about, Lillian, because we're into this, and I want to talk about this, we have to push the institutions, agencies, the governments to be responsible, because they cannot be not doing their work and to be not collecting the rubbish and just burning it in the open, and just dumping them in the oceans, because
Yeah,
no one is checking them. I mean, Lillian, I'm just going to say, the Anderson Consulting, the Price Waterhouse of the world, all right, there is no checking on the governments in terms of practices. Who's going to check them? I think at this point, status, only the consumers like you and I, who go and demand private sector and the public sector do something in addition to our own effort in doing what we can do within our own households and on a personal level. Over to you,
I
Lillian.
have a solution for that. I've been thinking about it. Most shareholders and people who support the various governments get paid large sums of money. Well, I think instead of being paid large sums of money, they need to earn their oxygen. They need to earn their clean.
The bottles of oxygen, right?
Yes, yes. And instead of getting paid in money, they have
Yeah.
to earn credits to get access to clean air, clean water, no litter around or anything else like that. And if they do not do it, then they need to go out and pick up the litter with one of those sharp sticks and put it into a bag. Or they need to use the recyclable air that one finds in the subways, the trains, the buses, and the airplanes. I mean, if they're going to act like second class or third class citizens, then they should be earning second and third class benefits and awards. I think giving them money is much too easy. It gets them out and they do not have to be held accountable or responsible for their greed and their appetite for more and more, because they'll never get enough to fill that need for greed. Sorry, that's just the way it is, folks. And I really
Yeah.
think if they had to earn the right, the privilege of living in a clean community, or pure air. Well, not pure because that kills you too, but air that has not been polluted or recycled 4 or 5 times as it goes through your air conditioner system.
Yes,
I'm pretty
recycle 4 or 5
sure
times.
that
Or
it
is
would
it
clean up
reused?
their act immediately, because these people do not live on the same spheres or the same economic levels that the rest of us voting citizens have. But the problem is, not everybody has the right to vote across the board in this planet. So I really believe that instead of receiving money, they should receive what is truly a life form that will guarantee that they can remain alive and well enough to carry out their jobs. Why should we
Yeah,
be punished for their sins? I
yeah,
don't look at myself as a whipping boy or girl in this matter, and I don't think Viki does either. So why should we, her and I, be punished for the people that are called shareholders and they have to get their due? I'll be more than happy to give them their due. I'll give them the due that I get and see how they like that due.
yeah. Lillian, this topic about pollution and responsibility, it has gone on for years. The argument, the pros and the cons, and I would like to really expand on it and give some concrete case studies. We've done today a couple of data, but I would like really to go into to delve into case studies of certain practices that we should promote, like what you've done, educating the young and educating ourselves about looking at the aquarium of goldfish. And I see myself as a goldfish. I see we are a goldfish.
We are
Um,
goldfish,
we
and if
are a
they feed us
goldfish.
too much, we get
We
fat.
we get piled up. And the thing is that, Lillian, fat in our body, the visceral fat, is the fat that accumulates the toxins that you
Yes.
cannot get out, and that's where you get all your diseases. So,
Yes.
I would like to further in the next few episodes, Lillian, we're talking about the state of current affairs. Of course, current affairs in every aspect of our lives, the environment we're living in, and the word environment is huge. It's just a one word. It's just a one word. It's not a complex word. It's not a compound word, but it constitutes a lot of things that goes down into in this tree of impact. We're talking about defining the environment and defining pollution. I hope I can do that in more concrete ways, and I hope I can share with some of your listeners and your viewers and your international listeners and your international viewers and audience about some responsible practices. And of course, these responsible practices do not stay there. They have to up their game. That's why we're here, because we have to be there. We have to be sure to check on them by calling them out. But I'd like to talk about a case that to round this off very quickly before we share another news article that I find really really interesting about what I found and read about Korea, South Korea. When we talk about Korea, we're just talking about South Korea, not North Korea, ladies and gentlemen. South Korea has this policy, I should say, government environmental policy. When you're talking about policy, we can have policies, but whether we enforce the policies and practice the policy and have penalties and consequences when you do not work within the policies is another thing, right? You can have just words and words of pages and pages. But what I know in one particular case that we can take back and remember at the end of this episode is South Korea. I understand in my research and reading is that, we take a lot of our trash, right? There's many ways of uh, putting away our trash. You can burn them in the open, all right? Let's say you're just like living in the rurals. You don't have a neighbors. You have a house in the middle of nowhere. You've got lots of trash and you can burn it. Okay, you're able to burn it, but you multiply that by 10 households and 10 times in 10 days. And then within that year, imagine that magnitude. So you can actually burn it or you can actually incinerate it in a responsibly designed, scientifically proven incinerator like in Singapore, because we incinerate. That's because we are an island. Where do we throw our trash? We actually incinerate it, or we actually put it in a landfill. We crush it, we sort them out, and then we divide them into categories. We separate into categories. Things that cannot be incinerated has to be thrown out, have to be compacted and to put in Singapore's landfill. And the landfill in Singapore is about 10, 20 years. It's an island. So it's a story that I could share with you and your listeners and your viewers. It's so interesting when you talk about the environment. So I read about South Korea, what they do with their trash. They compact the trash, they clean the trash, whatever they cannot be incinerated or put in the landfill, they actually clean them up, and they ship it out 5 miles away from the shore, and they dump it in seemingly responsibly. All right, and I can't say it whether it's good or whether it's bad, and compare. It's always relative. Compare with a country like in an X country, you don't know who they are, but they just pile it behind your backyard. They let it grow in some third world countries or some countries with first world countries, or they just dump it in the ocean without treating it responsibly. Treating is impossible. It's responsible because you're taking out those things that can actually pollute the environment, like chemicals. So I'm just reading about some countries, what are their practices, that they take them out, things that cannot be recycled, things that will pollute the environment. They take them out, and whatever they can, they make it compact, and then they put it up in a big box and they dump it into the ocean 5 miles away from the shore. Now, it's always an argument, right? People who are environmentalists, they say that's a good practice. People who are ultra environmental, they would say that's not um, a good practice. So I'm just saying that I hope I can bring this out as a kind of education to start our paralyzed mind. To start our paralyzed mind thinking what's right and what's wrong, what's in the middle, and what should we as final consumers demand for ourselves. Because it's a gray area. It's a huge gray area. Where should we put our trash? And at what level should enforcement comes in? Because it's such a big area of responsibility. You're talking about individual, institutional, private sector, and then you're talking about governmental agency. You're talking about people who are non-profit organization. How much power should they have to play their part in terms of pushing this voice and this conversation out there? We're talking about the forces of the world. I hope I can bring that bit of a snapshot of what's happening in the world of conversation from all these 5, 6 forces that is it's out there for you and your listeners and your audience. Lillian, back to you.
Great. So time is getting away from us, as it usually does. Our next scheduled state of current affairs is next
week,
Monday at 9:30 p.m.
Singapore time.
Yes, and 9:30 a.m. Warnersville time. That's the USA. Yes. Little city. Big things happen. However, and then we do another one. We do two of them a week. And the second one is on... Are we doing 2 a week?
Yes, I love to do 2 a week back to back so that the listeners.
So the next one would be on Tuesday morning.
Yes.
At 9:30 a.m. We always get our wires crossed. Just pretend you know what we're talking about. And 9:30 p.m. Singapore time, because she is on the other side of the world. I know your geography isn't strong. That's okay. When you have to think about what the 7 continents are, I give you permission to look it up. Hardly anybody ever gets that question right. So you're okay. You should know, though, that Africa is one of them. See? No, you only have to look up 6. Lucky for you. Okay, so do you have anything to say? And we should start closing it out.
Yes, I want to wrap this up by us reminding everyone that we've got a collaboration. It's My Life. It's My Life memoir. And I'm starting to think about memoirs, my own memoir, because I just want everyone to think about it right now, Lillian, and your audience and your listeners. What is the story you want to be written about you? When you enter into that tombstone, right? We all will do that, and hopefully it's a beautiful one. It doesn't matter because we're all gone by then. But hopefully we can leave behind a story that we can tell, and that hopefully our footprints will not be erased because we have left it behind the way we wanted it. So Lillian, yourself and myself as a publisher, and Lillian as the writer, as the assistant writer or the ghostwriter, for you, ladies and gentlemen, to write about your memoir. I'm already thinking about mine already. What is my story? And how do I want to end my story? I think that's very important. How do I want to write it? Because it's my life, it's my story, it's how I want it to happen in my journey. And only you can determine your life and how you want it to be told. So Lillian, It's My Life. Over to you. Anything you want to tell you about the audience about It's My Life?
Oh, yes. I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. And keep on coming back. You never know what's going to come out of my mouth. I can guarantee that. And Viki is the straight and narrow one, so you'll be rest assured she won't say anything that will upset you too much, but I don't make any promises. You can listen to this program all over again at youtube.com/Passionate World Radio, pwtalkradio.com, over at facebook.com/Passionate World Radio, on all of our social media, Tumblr, Instagram, LinkedIn, think I've named it all, but there's a lot of them out there. We belong to one in India. We belong to one all over the world. And I'm pretty sure they listen up at the space station, especially those
Yep.
2 stranded astronauts that have been there way too many.
Oh, wow. I'm not sure if they'll
But
be
that's
alive.
another can of worms. However, thank you all very much for listening. This program, State of Current Affairs, brought to you by MyFlex. Ruby.ai is approachable. Go try it out at https://esc73.try Ruby rubi.ai. Sign up for a monthly subscription. Contact me at the number below and let's talk it out. And also from PWTRN and the Obstacles of Podcasting Masterclass, go over to https://educational.passionateworldtalkradio.com/masterclass and get yourself up to speed, because the 21st century is going onwards and upwards. And if you don't do something now, you will be left behind in that proverbial reservation that was discussed in a science fiction book many years ago, and you do not want that to happen. So thank you very much and have a great evening. Good night.